When you go into a tactical situation, when it's life and death, you have to focus on exactly that moment, and you can't be focused on a bunch of technicalities. You need to be well trained enough that you can just move and move correctly, and it just happens inherently. I put it in my mind that just through sheer repetition of the movement that I could make my cutting better, and in fact made it worse. So it's a very frustrating point. And I think that happens a lot in EI, where you're thinking that you're doing what the sensei is telling you, but in point of fact, you're not. And when you reach those time periods, it can create those moments where a student may walk away and never come back.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Tokuskai Inside Look podcast. Today we're speaking with Jason Hankins from Salt Lake City, USA. Jason has been training for over 20 years, during which time he achieved the rank of Renshi Rokudan in Iaido and became the champion of the highest ranked division in the 2019 All-US Kendo Federation National Iaido Taikai. In this wide-ranging conversation, we talk about Jason's start in the martial arts and developing Iaido in a remote area of the country, the reinforcing cycle of learning between budo and real-life and death tactical situations, overcoming ego for growth and development as a person, and the need to find connection between individuals in martial arts and in life. This was a great opportunity for me to pick the brain of an Iaido practitioner I greatly respect, and the interview exceeded all my expectations. So, without further ado, please enjoy this inspiring conversation with Jason Hankins.
My name is Jason Hankins. I was born here in Salt Lake City and then raised in the Dallas, Texas area. Typical childhood, a little bit into sports and baseball and soccer, but I was never real competitive, unlike my younger brother. But early on, I started taking a bit of interest in martial arts as far as like karate. So I did kind of the typical youth type of things where I call them kind of the McDojo. Like as a young kid, I was always in the martial arts that I taught out of the strip center martial arts studio. So a little karate, little of all these kind of things that I did. Typical youth, right? Did them for 6 months to a year, and then it was on to, well, what's the next one? So that was kind of, I grew up kind of that way until late middle school. I got into some Kung Fu, Shaolin Hungar Kung Fu, and did that for a good long time. And then as things happened, life happens, and growing up and graduating high school and stuff, ended up moving back here to Salt Lake to focus on becoming a firefighter. And it was at that point that I was looking, of course, for, where's the next martial art place I might pick up practice? And I was looking to continue my Kung Fu practice, but I happened upon just like a Wild Oats shopping center that had on a corkboard flyer, a flyer about Iaido classes starting Japanese swordsmanship. And I took a real interest in that. I was like, that sounds, because of course, even growing up as a child, right, you're always in karate and aikido and all the different things, you're always like, oh, samurai sword, right? That's the cool thing. Of course, back in those days, you only had the yellow pages for a real resource. You didn't have the internet. You could just look up Kendo associations or anything like that. So yeah, I had no idea growing up that there was even swordsmanship going on in Dallas, which of course, come to find out later, there was. But so when I came upon that flyer, that was my first time. I was really like, wow, somebody's doing something with the samurai sword. Cool. So I took an interest in that, and that kind of where that started.
You mentioned very early on that when you were doing karate in the strip malls that they were like McDojos, and that's a term that we hear more often these days. What
right
set that
or
aside
nowadays you hear YouTube Sensei.
Yeah.
If you've been watching YouTube Sensei, you better be careful. So yeah.
At that time, was this something that you realized, that you understood, or is this something that you found out later on?
No, being a young child in martial arts, I was, I don't know, probably 8 or 9 when I started. Everything's just awesome when you're that young. But I know I wasn't really satisfied with the karate that I was doing, or everything kind of seemed to be lacking a little bit. Of course, at the time, I didn't really know what I was looking for. I was a young kid, just having fun and enjoying things, and enthralled with kicking and punching and the physical combative part of it. And as I got older, yeah, I knew I wanted something more. I'm not sure at the time I knew what that was, but I knew, like, oh, keep searching. And so, yeah, even from a young age, I kind of bounced from practice to practice, looking for something in the teaching, something in the teacher that would be what really spoke to me. So it took quite a long time before I found the Shaolin Hungar practice that really did speak to me and was a huge challenge physically and mentally. And then that kept me going for a long time.
What was it beyond the physical aspect of Kung Fu than the other ones that you practiced before? You said you were looking for something more. What was that?
Right. Well, right away, when I stepped foot into this Kung Fu studio, there was very much a sense of Sifu spoke about. He just briefly spoke to me as I came in to do the whole let's watch a class type of thing, and even just made it very apparent that hey, in broken English, this is us. This is what I do. There's plenty of other Kung Fu dojos out there. If you like it here, great. If not, please keep looking. A very different approach with this idea of hey, this is what I have. Take it or leave it. I'm not going to cater to you. I don't need you to be my student. You can practice if this suits you. If not, then please. So just a different approach, less commercialized, less, hey, come in, kind of a salesman type of approach that often kind of happened in other places of practice where they wanted you to come in. They wanted you to sign up for X amount of time. And even being a young kid, because that pitch often was given to my parents, I'm kind of hearing that. And, all along, just kind of like that resonated a little bit like, like, this is kind of about the money, right? This is kind of about something else, where this was definitely not. It was very opposite. Like, yeah, I don't really need you. So, but if you want to, please practice. And so that got me started. And then the very, very traditional Kung Fu school, the English was very broken, a lot of Chinese. So I was trying to pick up the Chinese as best I could. Very rich in tradition as far as you would practice. Then after practice, it was like they were kind of a family. They would hang out after practice and go to the Chinese restaurants, which being an early teens guy was trying all these different Chinese things that I'd never would try before. And they're hanging out even after the meals and getting together and playing ping pong. And so there's just the kind of family oriented, just felt very rich in tradition and felt very genuine. So that kept me practicing for quite a long time.
What a beginning for also sets an expectation for you when you move back to Salt Lake City that if you were to find something, you would want something similar.
Absolutely. When I started looking, I was absolutely looking for where's the next Shaolin Hungar place that teaches in that type of a way and has that type of feeling. But I came across EI before I found that. So
when you first saw the flyer, it's just the swordsmanship and blah, blah, blah. How long did it take you to discover more about what the dojo was about? And could you talk a little bit about the first few years of your practice there?
Sure. So I saw the flyer, and I think by the next Saturday, I was walking into the dojo, and it was the classes generally were just starting. They had practiced maybe 3 classes. Jules Harris was the teacher, so Harris Sensei to me. And yeah, things were just starting. And of course, some of the guys, what had happened was Jules Harris had moved here to Salt Lake to focus on his Zen practice. And there was a few students who, practicing Zazen, learned that he did swordsmanship back in New York. And they had kind of prodded him enough to start, hey, will you start teaching this? Will you show us this? So when I started, yeah, they were just a couple classes into it. And right away, of course, I was very in love with the Hakama and just like this feeling and sitting in Seiza. And things started to speak to me quite quickly as far as like this art feels correct. Like it feels like something I want to do. And of course, shortly into it, I was really enjoying the fact that unlike all my prior martial arts, there wasn't really a physical component as far as punching and kicking other people, right? Wasn't getting lost in that, right? You're focusing just on the movements. So this kind of simplicity of I need to focus on my body and the sword and focus on just the motion. It's not about, right, hey, pair me up with this guy over here and let's see who wins. So for martial arts, it was a big change in the approach. I mean, that approach is there with kata in karate and kung fu and things, but in EI, right? I mean, that's really all there. You just focus on that. You don't take your Iaido and go at it with each other. So really enjoyed what that was bringing to me. And obviously I stayed. The other students who had kind of helped start the dojo quickly kind of fell away within a month or two. And then it was myself and Jules Harris. And so I was his second guy, and we kind of brought up the dojo from there.
One thing that I've always been interested in or thinking about is usually there's two archetypes of people joining Iaido. There's the ones that are former martial artists, they're getting old, their body's kind of wearing down, so then they find something that's less stressful on them. And then there's, if it's the younger people, it's more like the nerds, the engineers, the teachers that kind of do it. You're not that. So how do you describe this kind of third category of super athletic person, very in a job that's very active and physical and sticking in and loving an art like Iaido?
Yeah, that's so funny. That makes me laugh because you're exactly correct. We see that in our own students, in my own students that come to the dojo. You see those kind of types. For myself, it's that attraction to extreme detail and precision, that mental and emotional aspect of the practice. That even being, I'll take that as a compliment, very physical, because there's right, you need a little bit of balance in everything, right? If you're just a physical guy, if you're looking for just good push your body type stuff, that's one thing. But you have to stop if you're going to be a balanced warrior, right? You have to stop and focus on other things. If you're just rooted in your musculature and your cardiovascular abilities, you're missing something in practice. And EI forces you to do that, obviously, because it's not so physical and because it is just a different, even on a physical level, it's very different. I don't know if gentle is the right word, but because it challenges your muscles in different ways and your body in different ways. But certainly it's not the big powerhouse type physicality that you get in other forms of practice. But yeah, I think it's been that there's so many aspects of EI that are very rich in your spirit, if you want to call it spiritual practice, your mental practice, which I think you need to be a well-balanced person. So all that aspect just kind of has kept me coming back again and again. At a certain point, you feel the need to take what you've learned and the benefit that you've received from EI and keep that going, pass it on to everybody else while you still continue, of course, to work on your own practice. So it's been certainly enough to keep me in love with it.
What are some of these benefits that you've found outside of the Iaido practice, like either the mental aspect or the things that you focused on in terms of detail that you've been able to bring into work or any other parts of your life?
Yeah. So as far as EI, one of the obvious kind of parallels that I can share with you, so EI is all, about detail. It's about a lot of things, but one of the things it's about is detail and paying attention to detail and knowing your body in relationship to your proprioception and all the things around you and the instruments that are in your hands, right? High level EI, hopefully, right? The sword and the body and the mind are all one connected together. So this also comes out in my preparation for the things I do on the tactical side of things. So I'm a member of the Joint Special Operations Group in Utah, which is a state tactical team. So we service the whole state and sometimes some activities out of the state with all kinds of things, manhunts, hostage rescue, warrant serves, all these kind of things. So that line of work, obviously you have to be very detailed, right? You have to know exactly where your gear is, has to be situated a certain way, and you have to just be ready. And that is something I think where EI has helped me be disciplined in that regard, is the amount of discipline that you have to have in EI, right? Just by default kind of makes you a very thorough person. And that has contributed how I do things on the tactical side of things. It's kind of interesting. Prior to getting into the police service, I had never fired a firearm in any real sense. A couple times growing up in Texas, right? It's just one of those default things. As a Texan, you're going to fire a firearm growing up sometime. But as an adult, I had never fired a firearm. And as I was getting ready to go to the police academy, I had a few pointers, right? Here's your gun. This is how you hold it. This is how you use it. When you're drawing it and pointing it, go through these things in your mind. And the very, very first day that I actually put bullets into that magazine, it was at the police academy, right? It was the first range day. And after the first range day at the end, you had a qualifying test. You just kind of wanted to see where you were at. And my very first qualifying test, very first day actually firing a firearm, I scored a perfect 250. 250 was the perfect score. And I attribute that to kind of that Iaido mindset, right? I knew only the very, very fundamentals, and every single time I drew the weapon, it was breathe, relax. You're relaxing with this hand, squeezing with this hand. You're looking down the sights. You're doing just, it's very much like EI to shoot. As far as precision target shooting, it's very much the same. Relax and just focus on the fundamentals. And yeah, of course, I've been chasing that perfect 250 ever since, right? I shot really well on day one, nice beginner's mindset. And then every time after that, it's been a challenge to get back to being able to shoot perfect. But yeah, there's definitely a correlation between overall discipline, folding that uniform every time you take it off, when you put it on, the mindset, the level of attention you're putting into it, the level of attention you need to have when you're using the sword. It very much correlates to that same level of attention you need when you're involved in the tactical world and using weapons.
Do you see other people on these tactical teams that don't have a practice like this where they have this commitment to discipline, or is everyone there of the same mindset, but they found it through a different means?
Yes, there are a lot of the same mindsets, a lot of mindset for discipline. Kind of as you alluded to, though, a lot of them are very, like there's guys that practice jujitsu and guys that are deep into CrossFit. And so disciplined, but very much on a much more physical level. It is just a little bit different, right? You look around and a lot of big macho guys and they're all very awesome. But yeah, just a little bit different approach. There's not too many. There are a lot of guys that they're very deep thinkers. And so for a lot of them, I kind of think like, oh, if I could get you to come over and try EI, you might be really impressed by it and enjoy it. But it's very, very tough. Most of them prefer that gritty, roughness. So
you mentioned about this being ready for something, and often we talk about in Iaido, you have to be ready for an opponent at all times. That's kind of what it means by the art itself, because your sword's inside your belt, you actually have to be ready to take it out at any time. When you're talking about bringing that mindset into a job, into a work where you have to have the same mindset, it feels counterintuitive to me, because Iaido seems like you would gain from that experience. You would bring tactical and that kind of experience into your EI. Can you talk about how you reverse that? Because one is more fake than the other one in some sense.
Right. Well, I think it's very cyclical. So, I mean, the things I get in my professional career definitely, I think, feed into my Iaido, and then that Iaido, feeds back into it. I think that it's right. You can practice Iaido like anything on a very kind of surface level, or you can practice it very, very deep. And I think one of the things that is difficult to focus on in Iaido practice is that hardcore fact that you're training with a lethal weapon. I mean, of course, we're, doing EI, so it is focused on the motion and the body. It's focused on a lot of technicalities, but kind of at its root core, right, you're dealing with a lethal weapon. And so there's a truth there that I think we don't cover very often. We don't talk about it very often. We talk about, oh, in this kata, you're killing this guy. You have 3 opponents here, so you're going to kill him in this order. This guy's you talk about kind of those things a little bit, but I think it's hard to really help anybody develop that very serious mindset of practice. We don't want to practice EI like fixated on killing and death, right? You don't necessarily want that mindset, but it does bring something very deep to your practice to come back to that root at some point and realize the seriousness of the practice. I think that anytime you're working with a lethal weapon, I think you have to start with a notion of love. And I know that that's really kind of odd to say, like, how does dealing with a lethal weapon correctly originate in love? So in a way, I guess you can say Iaido very much is about love. You have to have a love of yourself. You have to be confident. You have to be hard on yourself, but compassionate, because you have to love others, right? You can't, if you put on a lethal weapon, like in EI, we have this invisible opponent in front of us. If that was a real thing though, right? If to use that weapon correctly, you have to have a sense of love for everybody on the other side of that weapon. You have to break down those walls of separateness. Oh, it's me versus somebody else. I think you need to recognize the connection there. Like that opponent is not entirely different and disconnected from you, right? There's a humanity between us and our opponents that is the same. And so you have to be compassionate, not only with yourself, but with them. And yet sometimes knowing that yeah, sometimes you have to draw that weapon. So you have to be ready. All this is you could talk about this stuff for hours. One of the things from the fire department side of things that contributes perhaps to some of this is, I've been a paramedic since 2002. I started with the fire department in 98, which incidentally is the same year I started EI. In that, being a paramedic, I've really learned in a very real sense just how grateful I need to be every day for being alive and for being able to do something as simple as breathe. I've seen many, many, many lives lost that from very young infants, all ages, right? So I have this very deep sense of appreciation for life, gratitude for life, and just a very deep sense of today could be it. Life's very fragile and it's very precious. So I've learned that lesson in a very deep, real sense. And so every day I'm grateful. And when you begin to then handle a lethal weapon like we do in EI, like you do in the tactical sense, that certainly plays into things, right? You have to be ready on any day to know that, right, today could be your last day. There's that quote, and I couldn't tell you who it's from, but one who is a samurai must by day and by night keep constantly in mind the fact that he has to die. Now, this really is very, very potent. And so often we give kind of lip service to how precious life is, live, love, laugh, and these things. And we talk about how precious life is, how important it is to stay in the moment. But it's very easy to do that in a superficial sense. And I think if you can elevate your practice to this level of seriousness of genuinely knowing that, hey, this day is precious and this moment is precious. And even in the context of having an opponent in front of you, they're precious too, and they're a part of you in some way. So you have to use your weapon in a very just manner and only when it's absolutely necessary. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, no,
Yeah.
absolutely. We've heard Hanshi mention stuff like this, and it's so hard to imagine that without the historical context of understanding, like being in the day where samurai were walking around and at any moment would be giving their lives for something. You kind of have that personal experience being in the line of work you're doing that. You would have that. And I love that you said that every day is precious, because when we talk about having the opponent, we're not just talking about there's someone you have to kill, because in Iaido, we're still just practicing a sword art that's never going to be used. So
Right.
in that sense, you're saying that we shouldn't waste the time we have in our dojo. We shouldn't waste any moment we have in our practice and do anything sloppy in that way, that we should be focused and just, yeah, bring our whole.
Absolutely. Everything, put as much attention into everything as you can and appreciate it, right? Appreciate the feeling of the floor under your feet. Appreciate every little bit, every flavor, every smell, every sensation. Yeah, appreciate it very, very much so. Yeah. If you approach practice in that manner, that this sword is right when you go to touch it, it's a matter of life and death. Metaphorically speaking, if you want to call that for EI, right? We're not at risk of losing our lives when we handle this. But if you can put that in your mindset to know that from that moment you even begin to move your hands to the sword, there is an element there of life and death, and you want to move well. You want to do everything in your last moments, right? You want to do everything as best you can. Live or die, you want to be fully there and be in that experience as much as possible. Yeah. If you keep that constantly in mind, that today may be the day, hopefully it puts you in a sense of, I need to live really well. I need to, as much as possible, make sure that everybody, and this comes from my tactical side, I guess, but you want to make sure that everybody at home knows without a shadow of a doubt how much you love them, how much they mean to you, as much as you can avoid it. You never want to walk out of the house on an argument, right? Or go to bed at night with the last things you've said to each other, harsh things. So every day you try to live really genuine and as best you can with nothing hidden, so that if that moment comes where you need to engage in a life and death moment, that you don't have to have regrets and things that cloud your mind. You need absolute clarity in that moment. And so you have to be able to go forward into that moment already knowing that things are settled and in a good way. And you can do this kata, you can do this interaction with lethal potential in a very clear way. whether that's reality in my job or even on the kata or even on the floor, right? As we, in EI, we compete and we test and things. And, at some level, you have to think of all the technical stuff. You have to be on the floor and you have to be reminding yourself to stand straight. And I'm going to cut, and that cut's going to end at this location, and my body's going to be in this shape, and I'm going to progress to the next motion this way. And you have to have all these technical things. But I think for me so far, a good day where I can go out on the floor and I'm very satisfied is if I can go out on the floor and the time for all the technical thinking is in all the hours that you put into practice before you get out there, whether it's for your Shinsa or your Taikai. And as soon as they say Hajime, and even before then, right, in that moment, you're clear. And I very much try to focus on that. The next things I do are I'm killing that opponent. I win before I go, win before I even start, and be clear-minded and truly not paying attention to judges, not paying attention to the competitor next to me, but instead it's this moment of this sword drawing and full zanshin, full attention on the opponent, very much living in that confrontation. I don't know, that sounds kind of terrible, I guess, to say, or scary, but if I can come away from, the Taikai ends and I walk off the floor, regardless of whether the flag went up for me or not, I feel like if I went out there and did my kata with full attention on my opponents and I wasn't distracted by, oh, shoot, I just overstepped, or, oh, shoot, I just made this error. Instead, no matter what happens out there, if I'm just focused on executing the way I know how to execute and focusing fully on one opponent after the other, then I come away feeling like, okay, I did well out there. I was clear-minded and focused on the opponents. For the time that I was out there, it was life and death. And with my mental approach, right, where my mind was at and my sword was at, it all came together and I executed well. If I was out there and I feel like, I was noticing all these other things, I would notice my opponent to the left and right, and I saw the judges where they were looking, and I felt that I was doing this wrong and this wrong and this wrong. Then I know I wasn't in the right mindset for the competition at the time, or the Shinsa at the time. I want to go out and execute in a way that allows me just to focus on the opponent. And I don't know. I suppose that comes from some of that tactical stuff, right? When you go into a tactical situation, when it's life and death, then you have to be exactly just that. You have to focus on exactly that moment, and you can't be focused on a bunch of technicalities. You need to be well trained enough that you can just move and move correctly, and it just happens inherently. So
I'd imagine that there are competitions in the tactical training too, in a sense that there's obstacle courses or there's shooting tests. How would you compare those two types of environments, like an Iaido competition?
yeah, very similar. Of course, even when we go do shooting competitions, even then are mindful. Like there's a difference between a shooting competition and then real life tactics. When you're busting in a door and going through, a house and there's people inside, there's a big difference between competition and actual reality application. But the competition has its own value to it, just like EI, right? Doing the competition itself will benefit you greatly. Like it has a lot to teach you. And so the same thing is there in firearms, in shooting, in marksmanship, and it challenges you in very much the same way, right? I know when I'm going to do EI, right? As I'm kind of getting ready, if I've lost my attention on it, I'm going to refocus on my breath, just resettle things down and try to be clear-headed as I execute my kata. And then shooting is the same way, right? You have to kind of slow down. Even as you start to get amped up and your heart rate starts to go up, you have to kind of go, okay, right? Breathe, recenter, refocus, clear your mind, right? Forget about the fact that you want to win this thing. Forget about the fact that guy just shot this good score. You have to just kind of let that go and go, okay, I'm just going to do the best job that I know how to do. I'm just going to focus on fundamentals. I'm going to go out there. I'm just going to shoot this. And however, win or lose, right, that's how it's going to play out. And so it very much it's very similar to EI in that regard. Even though you're shooting a firearm, it's that same thing. Slow down, don't get overworked. And so all the time, I feel like I'm always practicing EI, or always practicing. When I'm practicing EI, in some way, I'm kind of practicing firearms as well. When I'm practicing marksmanship, I'm still, in a sense, practicing EI because it's a lot of that same processing. It's a lot of that same mental preparation, calming yourself down, centering yourself, and then executing whatever it is.
Do you ever find that that comes to your mind consciously, as in like when I'm doing EI, I just remember this thing where I was shooting or tactical thing? Or do you feel it's more of a general feeling that you're applying one to the other?
Yes, both are true. Sometimes it's very conscious. Sometimes I know, like, okay, wait, I'm getting too worked up. I need to breathe, just like any EI. Remember, okay, breathe, bring it down low. But a lot of times it happens subconsciously. We did 2 days of firearms training just recently, where we're transitioning from one sight system to another optic system. And at the end, they kind of surprised us with a little competition that they had put together. And it was a complex course of shooting fire. So they gave us a dry run on it so that everybody kind of understood what the course of fire would be. And first time through, I didn't shoot very well. Didn't shoot very well at all. And after that first round, then they're like, okay, this is the one that counts. So here we go. And yeah, the second time through, I didn't consciously really think through anything. I did just kind of calm down and let myself execute without a mind full of like, oh, squeeze this hand to this percentage, do this. Instead, that second time around, I just took a deep breath and kind of let it all go and went out and shot the course of fire in 19 seconds. It was about 5 seconds faster than anybody else executed. And during the course of fire, I missed one shot. But having missed that shot, I just moved on to the next one. And yeah, so I won the competition, but it was not a real conscious change. I just kind of calmed down and let it go. And sometimes when you do EI and you come away and you just feel good, but you can't remember any of the specifics that you right? You weren't fixated on a certain type of movement or thing. And you just you're like, it just happened. Like that execution of EI just happened. And that's kind of what that was like that day. I came away having won the competition, just kind of going, wow, that second time through, I really wasn't determined to win. I just kind of did it. And when the instructor stopped the clock and said, whoa, 19 seconds, just kind of one of these were like, whoa, really? Like I, couldn't believe it myself. And everybody kind of joked like, oh, okay, I guess we all better just give you the trophy now type of thing. It was just one of those moments where it was just a moment that happened. And I think that's also some of my best days in EI are when you can get out there and when you start things, they just fall into place and it's not full of thinking and digestion of the motions, and you just do it and you come away and it just feels great.
It sounds like something that's rarely experienced in Iaido only practitioners, because that's all our training is follow the grading points, follow the judging points, always do things exactly perfectly. And yet when you actually perform the best is when you don't think about those things, is when you kind of let it go. So this is like a real life case of same thing. You can learn all the technical aspects of shooting perfectly, but you can't think about it when you're actually doing it. You won by like 20% over the next person, 5 seconds out of 20, 25.
Yeah. It was kind of crazy. So yeah, everybody was we're all kind of just laughing like, well, and I just kind of had to shake my shoulders and go, well, shoot. Yeah. Are you kidding?
Well, the Michael Jordan shoulder shrug after like hitting those threes.
Yeah. So there's a lot of ways where constantly my professional career and Iaido career kind of parallel each other. And I'm learning all the time things in the tactical world that kind of feed back into EI and vice versa. So they both help me. It's completely cyclical. The lessons I learn in EI just keep me sharper and disciplined in the tactical world.
So going back to the martial arts and discovering it and then starting practice, you mentioned earlier on your first Kung Fu instructor was saying, like, if you don't like mine, you can go to another one down the street or whatever like that. Iaido, if you were to repeat the same thing, you'd probably have to say, well, you have to drive like 500 miles to another state to be able to participate. So
right.
Can you talk about the community feel in something like Iaido compared to these more popular arts that you experienced? And then how have you been able to maintain connections with people when we have to be so far away?
Sure. I think that Jules Harris Sensei, when he was starting Zenbukan, he had very much kind of a similar approach to my Kung Fu teacher, as far as like he wasn't fixated on building a big dojo. He wasn't fixated on getting numbers. And so that also kind of was one of those things that I identified with. And I've tried to keep that going. I think AGI is very unique in that you don't readily get a bunch of feel goods from EI. Most people looking for martial arts kind of want a little bit of, hey, how long do I have to practice before you hand me this belt, or before I can take the test at least? What's involved? And they kind of want these things outlined in this plan, and Iaido doesn't give you that. And I have tried to, when Sensei Harris left, I tried to just keep that same approach, in that I don't instruct in a way it doesn't cater to keeping students. Like, right, here's the teaching, right? Here's what it is, and like it or not, right? You can continue to practice for years, or practice for however long you benefit from it and want to practice. But I certainly don't cater to trying to keep students, which can be hard, right? This is an art where it is hard to keep students. It's hard to get students that stay for any long duration, right? At this point, I have 2 students that are Sandan, and that's in 22 years of practice teaching for the last 18 or 19 years. It's hard. It's hard when you have students that come and go all the time. And then specifically in Salt Lake, right, when I started practicing, I had my sensei for a short period, and then he moved away back to Philadelphia to start his own Zen center. And so, yeah, you're all alone, right? Yeah, it is one of those things where, well, if you don't like the EI that we're practicing here, then good luck. There's the next place over is states away. At the same time, that creates that challenge for us, where just about my entire EI practice has been essentially you're on your own kind of thing out here. But Jules Harris Sensei had originally started in New York with Kenzen. And so there was a little bit of a relationship there with Parker Sensei and some of the Kenzen group, where I had introductions to Parker Sensei through Jules Harris Sensei. And when he left, I kind of knew, like, man, I have to have some kind of connection, right? Some kind of connection to where I can get instruction, because I can teach here in Salt Lake in a vacuum, but if I don't ever have anybody looking at me, then I'm not going to improve the way I want to. And possibly I'm going to do weird things, right, and think I'm correct. So I have to have somebody looking at me and giving me feedback. And of course, you get that at the national seminars to some degree, but you have to develop some kind of relationship that's deeper than seeing them once a year at the national seminar and kind of taking a few notes. You have to have something deeper. And luckily, I was able to, with the help of a few others, keep that connection with Kenzen and help that grow. Because otherwise, yeah, I would be out here in Salt Lake just on my own. And still, I don't see and work with too often, but often enough. It challenges me and keeps me on my game. Of course, as very, very sharp instructors, Parker Sensei and Secreta Sensei, and they're very good at those times when I do see them, of making sure that I fix any strange things I did, and they give me plenty to work on. So I take that and then just work on it as much as I can. But I think anybody who is in these places where you're kind of a remote school or a remote practitioner, you face a distinct challenge in trying to keep your practice accurate and up to date as small things change over the years, and having to look at just yourself all the time and question constantly, right? Is this correct? Am I actually doing the thing that I think I'm doing the way I think I'm doing it? That's a challenge for any Iaido practitioner, right? Because we execute things and we do things, and you think that you're doing them a certain way. You think you're doing this cut well or this movement well. And the reality can be very different, that, your foot isn't actually nearly as straight as you think it is, or your cut isn't actually stopping where you think it is. So those kind of nuances, if you don't have an instructor close to you to go to, it's rough.
Mm-hmm. So far, you've talked about this persistent challenge of being away from instructors, and then just improving. People normally think it's like a linear path upwards, and yet there's a lot of ups and downs and going all over the places. Could you talk about one time in your career so far in the 20 years that was really low for you, or was really tough for you, and how did you manage to get out of it?
I'll give you 2 examples, I suppose, and they're very different levels. Early in my practice, I would say within the first 2 years, I just got it in my mind one time that I was going to really be a good student, right? I was going to just cut like and I'm going to do 200 cuts a day for a month. And I thought I was cutting really well, left hand and nice and straight, stopping where I just thought I was doing everything perfectly with this cut. And I cut 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 like crazy. And then in the dojo, what began to happen was they just got more and more input that, my cutting was not correct. Wrong. And so where I thought I was really doing something great, I thought I was being a good student and doing this, and thought I got the opposite input. And I actually had to take a step back and relax and try to really do a better job of understanding what my sensei was trying to teach me at the time, what he was trying to tell me about why my cutting was wrong, and just kind of get over that. I put it in my mind that just through sheer repetition of the movement that I could make my cutting better. And in fact, it made it worse. So it's a very, frustrating point. And I think that happens a lot in EI, where you're thinking that you're doing what the sensei is telling you, but in point of fact, you're not. And when you reach those time periods, it can create those moments where a student may walk away and never come back. Just because there's that, like, oh, I'm doing the good thing. I'm being devoted. I'm working hard. And then you get that input. Nope, wrong. Do this. Well, I thought I was doing that. Well, no, you're not doing that. Are you sure? So lots of moments like that, I think, those moments are a part of Iaido practice, and how you react to those moments, I think, are opportunities for growth as a student and as a person. It's very similar. There's times when you are sure that the sensei said, do this exactly this way. And so much you try to do that. And then the next day, randomly in class, you'll hear them say it differently. And you're like, whoa, that's different from what you said. And there's this frustration. They're like, what? That's not what you said. And of course, you can't just say that. You have to digest it and kind of go, okay, wait, where's the real lesson in here? There's a lot of difficulties and challenges in that. And that certainly was one that I can remember from early. I was very frustrated with that. And how can I not be cutting right when I've been working so hard on it? But yeah, I digested it and got beyond it and kept practicing. Another example, just a time that was really hard, is more on the higher dan growth. As you grow in EI, right, as you continue going, you're expected to participate in increasingly responsible things. As you become a teacher, you need to participate in instruction. You need to participate in judging. My sensei, Jules Harris sensei, that I worked with early on, he left as a teacher. He left me before I ever saw him be a fourth dan practitioner. When he passed his fourth dan, shortly after that is when he moved away. So I never had an example of what a fourth dan should be, or how they should act, or the different things that were expected of them. And there was a little bit of a difficult moment in the first year that I was fourth dan, going to a national seminar. As I learned, eventually there was quite a few things that are expected of you as a fourth dan that I didn't understand. And I had a very difficult experience at one point where some teachers that I extremely, extremely respected, they had asked just kind of in general, and there was some miscommunication, of course, that played into it, like so many things, but they asked in general that, all fourth dans come over here to do this thing. And I didn't quite understand the communication, and I didn't end up going over there to participate in what the fourth dans were doing. And I didn't think I was supposed, it was just very confusing, right? And when I didn't participate in that, I got a very brutal awakening to it. I was confronted by 3 teachers a little bit later who very sternly let me know that absolutely you are expected to do this, this, and this. And because we appreciate you and we appreciate your EI and we think you have a lot of potential, we're very disappointed in you. And they let me know it in a very stern way. And coming away from that, it was definitely a moment where, like, right, if you let your ego be out front and you let your ego drive you, from an ego standpoint, right, I was bothered and I was hurt and I feel like I had failed. At the same time, the way that they let me know this was, it was one of those moments where I could have walked away from the practice completely, just kind of going, well, I don't want to shoot if that's how things are going to go, and I'm going to be in trouble for things, and I'm just going to walk away. But it was too late for me. I'm already in love with EI, and I very much respected these teachers. And in the end, I actually appreciated their sternness And I appreciated them saying, hey, you're good at EI. We want you to be with us. We want you to come up with us. We want you to do these things with us. This is part of your responsibilities now as you grow in EI. You have to do these things. It's not optional. So looking at that and having to breathe for a little while and kind of get over it, as far as like the hurt side of it, went, okay, yeah, but they're right. I am going to step up to this, and I'm not going to shy away from being out front. I'm not going to shy away from judging and participating and all these things that are coming, right? It's a part of growth. It's a part of being a higher dawn teacher. But that was definitely a challenging moment in my practices, making this transition. And now having done that, of course, as my own students come up, I make sure, like, look, right, you have to see this and you have to know this is coming. And there's, as you continue in practice, this is just going to be the natural growth. And because it is intimidating to be, for the first times, right, standing out there as a judge, standing out there during Taikai and holding the flags and making those choices. It's terribly intimidating to sit on a judging panel for Shinsa. But right, it's a part of growth. It's a part of just stepping up to the next thing and giving back to EI, giving back to the practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, because it's one thing that very few people realize that it's coming. And then when it hits them, it's kind of like a shock. For so many people that are early on in their budo careers, they leave because the practice is no longer just fun for them, or they find something more interesting. But at the high ranks, your story is as common as anything else. Most people leave because of something that they had to take responsibility for themselves and to do more, and they couldn't take it. I know a lot of people like that. I've been through that too. So it is so tough. It's like, but it's life-changing as well. It's like, oh, wait, it was so hard for me. I got through the other side. What more can I do? It's very liberating in that sense as well.
Right. It's a new level of challenge. It's a new level of growth for you. I don't think I ever was like, oh yeah, I want to really practice EI because I really want to stand out front and make big decisions that'll affect other people's practice. But it is just a whole different level of continuing to grow, continuing to be challenged. And now I can say today that I'm still a little bit nervous sometimes at first when you are going to be the ones to judge. But just like everything else, right? It's take a deep breath. Okay, this is just that next thing. You just do it. And I actually enjoy it now. So just continuing to learn, continuing to grow.
Mm-hmm. Cool. There's so much more that I wanted to talk to you about, but I think this is a great place to wrap up our first chat. Is there anything that you might want to, you said you listened to one podcast before, you can respond to whatever you heard there, or something that you might want to share to people that are listening to this, seeing that they come from all parts of budo life and doing different arts from different countries. What do you think that you like to share that you've learned yourself?
I think we touched on it a little bit earlier, but I think one of the things that I really hope that my own students discover in their practice, and anybody that I can share this with that could benefit from hearing it, I hope that if my own students don't get anything else from me, if they don't learn anything else from my teaching, is I hope that they learn that we're all connected and we're all a part of each other. The idea that we're separate, completely individual, separate people is not entirely accurate, right? There's that connection. And so when you practice EI or you practice whatever that thing is that you're engaged in, just to discover and somehow find that way to break down kind of those walls of illusion that say that I am this and you're that over there, and we have to be at complete odds. If you're my opponent, then we're at complete odds with each other. Instead, finding in every person that you come across that you're connected in some way, right? Our humanity runs very common through, right? We all want the same things. We all want to be loved. We all want to be appreciated. We all want to feel safe and secure. This is very, very much in all of us. And what each of us do on some level has effect on everybody else. So to take that and to make that something to realize on a very deep level, is something I want for all my students. It's like the koan mu in Zen practice, the koan practice, the mu, when you are working on that first major koan, it's kind of like that, like our mai. It's just that essential thing. And you're really chipping away at that idea of like, wow, I'm not completely separate, right? It's not just this flesh. There's more to it there. And I can give voice to it right here, like just like I've done, but it falls really so short. It's something everybody has to discover in and of themselves. But maybe we can point the way a little bit and say, hey, this is really the real thing. Like, right, love yourself, love the people around you, and know that we're all the same. And what we're doing here, as far as Iaido practice, is getting you more connected with yourself, but also hopefully connecting you on a very real level with everybody else around you.
Well, yeah. Jason, that's so great because you're explaining something that I see that you live, because every time I have a conversation with you, I get to talk to you, I go away in a better place. I'm more motivated, more inspired. So really.
Well, thank you. Likewise. Likewise, it's, these relationships are part of what's special about EI and all martial arts. It's that connection.
Yep. So hopefully we can meet again in person soon when all this is over.
I hope so.
Thank you so much and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you very much, Patrick. We'll see you. Take care.
Bye. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that episode because we have a lot more exciting conversations to share as we explore the world of the traditional Japanese martial arts. The Inside Look podcast is available on most common podcasting platforms and on YouTube. Remember to subscribe to not miss out on new interviews as they are posted. We're always looking for feedback to improve, so please write us a review or drop us a line at podcast@tokushikai.ca or on Facebook and Instagram at tokushikai.canada. Until next time, thanks for listening.